Thank you so much for the opportunity to share Home Builders Model. And I will take a brief moment to provide you with some context of how intensive home-based services under the waiver project was implemented, and turn it over to Campus Charities to talk more about nuts and bolts of Home Builders Model, how it's working, the detail of the program. Thank you. We can sit down. Shall I stand up? Can you see me? Or shall I stand? Is it easier for the folks on the video?
Whatever's comfortable for you.
Okay. So again, my name is Kimari Hall. I'm the Title 40 Project Waiver Project Manager with the Child Welfare Services Branch of CHS. And I've been with the department for about 2.5 years. Preceding the implementation of the waiver project, we put together or finalized the innovation models under the waiver project. And since then, we do the implementation, management, and also coordinating program implementation as part of the waiver project component. So my part of the presentation objectives are to provide overview of the 4U waiver project as a context, to provide overview of how the target populations and interventions were identified and designed, and to share successes and opportunities, lessons learned so far in the last 2 years since the implementation of the project and intervention. So in 2012, Hawaii DHS Child Welfare Services applied for the Title 40 waiver project. And what is 40 waiver and what does it allow us to do? So from the federal government, Title 40 entitlement is primarily to pay for foster care room and board and federal reimbursement of approximately 50% back to the states for both foster board, room and board, as well as administrative costs of running the foster care program. So in the last decades, so the message from the federal government to access 40 federal funding is to really remove those who are removed from their homes and placed in foster care, and those are eligible for 40 entitlement. States can claim 50% or so of the cost. So that was the basis of the funding. So about 20 years ago, waiver project was authorized and appropriated, just like block grant. So those states that apply for the waiver, and why the term waiver is, we are waived from the traditional authority of the Title 40 and use the 40 funding more flexibly. That doesn't mean we take all the 40 funding from the children who are in foster care, but just added cushion in a sense to try something new, more innovative than just removing children and pay for foster board. So that's the reason why it's called waiver. Hawaii received approval from the federal government to participate in the waiver project as of 2013. So since then, Hawaii did data analysis to identify where the barriers or practice improvement, or where is the challenges exist in the child welfare system from the point of reducing children in foster care, both at the entry, in care, and exit. And part of the FOIA waiver project is to really test and demonstrate flexible use of funding is better than removing children and pay for foster care. So child welfare financial reform is the big part of this waiver project objectives as well. And during the time of data analysis, we identified two big groups that we wanted to target. One is short stayers, which are in our definition, children who are or are likely to come into foster care and exit within 30 days. So 30 days is a very short period of time for anyone to be placed or removed from their families and return home. And the other target population is long stayers. So those are already in care, but our definition is children who remain in foster care 9 months or longer. So these are based on the state fiscal year 2012 to 2013 data. And home builders model is one of the two innovations that we implemented for the short stayers. And before home builders or we make a referral, the first step is to respond to police protective custody, hospital referral, as well as school referral. Generally, school referral is also included in the police protective custody, and respond within 2 hours of report coming into our hotline. The reason, and based on, again, data analysis, showed that about over 50% of those who are removed and exit in the same fiscal year actually return home within 30 days. So that's a high percentage of children coming into care for such a short time. So our theory of change and hypothesis was that if they return home so fast, wasn't there something we could have done to prevent from coming in at all? So unnecessary removal was one of the objectives of crisis response team. And following that, our theory was that for those who CRT responded and wasn't able, may or may not be able to prevent removal, very high risk, possibly having safety concerns, but there may be an innovation that we could implement with intense home-based services, and instead of removing children and return them home maybe about 10, 15 days, rather just put that upfront, really intensive home-based services might prevent further from children from coming in. So that was the theory, and when home builders model was selected. So that's kind of the context of why we began intensive home-based services implementation under the waiver project. And this is, again, demonstration. So program evaluation component, including both process and outcome evaluations, as well as cost analysis as part of this flexible use of FOIA funding. So those three evaluation components are part of this project. And so far, in 2 years, we had great successes as well as future opportunities, lessons learned. Successes, one of the biggest successes is truly the collaborative work and partnership between the CWS and the providers such as Catholic Charities. I keep skipping the slides, I just realized. and I'm already done with this part. And we, for the systemic issues, administrative office staff, including myself as well as Lisa and Cheryl from Catholic Charities, and we also have 2 other sites under the waiver, in addition to Oahu as the metropolitan area. We have East Hawaii section, which is the Hilo side, and West Hawaii section, that is Kona. These 3 sites have intensive home-based services utilizing home builders model as part of the demonstration. So we keep our lines of communication open. Not only we have case consultation, case status weekly call. Oahu currently, since maybe about a year and a half into it, we reduced the time to every other week. But having that regular call really helps to troubleshoot any sort of systemic issue right there, as well as some of the case concerns. So those are the biggest successes that I have seen and continue to improve our partnership. And in terms of future opportunities and lessons learned, home builders model is very is evidence-based or evidence-informed. It's ranked as scale of 1 to 5, scale 2 within the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare. So it's supported. And there are several different program evaluation of the home builders, I believe, posted on their website as well. So very narrow, in a good way, narrow eligibility to expect the outcomes that the program is designed to expect. So that is somewhat new to us and very challenging in terms of fidelity to the model and true to the model. So that's a new practice that we have been learning in order for us to produce the outcome that we expect. We should remain true to the model. So that's one of the challenges that we have, and getting better. And because of that, as much as our staff as well as Catholic Charities really want to bring more families and maximize the service, sometimes that's not always the case. And again, to expect the outcomes that we want to see based on the model, we have to follow those criteria. So that's challenging. And also, the cost of program as well as per family, that's also part of the consideration that I, as the project manager, always have to kind of keep track. So cost benefit is also part of the challenging and stay on track. So that's also kind of the future opportunities to apply to other cases in the event we would like to expand or make this as part of the regular service array. So those are kind of the lessons learned that I've been learning on the CWS side. And if, that's kind of the overview and context of the implementation of the intensive home base. And my contact information is on the last page of the PowerPoint. If you have any questions, maybe at the end of this entire presentation, I'm happy to answer, as well as feel free to email or contact me. Thank you so much.
The quick introduction, Cheryl? Okay, the quick introduction.
Yeah, of course. And then is the...
Oh yeah, Albert, can you feel the... So I'll just talk loud, so I don't have to transfer that over. So presenting from Catholic Charities, we have Cheryl. Mendez and Lisa Peck. Thank you very much for coming down. Cheryl is currently the program manager for the Intensive Home-Based Services program at Catholic Charities Hawaii, and she has experience working in areas of child abuse and neglect and therapeutic foster homes for children and youth. Ms. Mendez oversees the comprehensive counseling and support services and the voluntary case management programs here on Oahu. She attended the University of Hawaii in Manoa, where she received a master's degree in social work, and in her free time she enjoys traveling, and you can find her on most weekends chasing after her 2-year-old son. I can relate to that. Lisa currently is the program director for the Intensive Home-Based Services program at Catholic Charities Hawaii and has about 7 years of experience working with child abuse and neglect and families. Ms. Peck is licensed as a mental health counselor and is in the process of getting certified in trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. She graduated with a BA in psychology and minor in Japanese from Occidental College and received her MA in counseling from Wayland Baptist University. She has previously worked as the program coordinator in the Comprehensive Counseling and Support Services program in voluntary case management, outreach, and as a program coordinator for bullying prevention programs at the elementary and middle school levels. Ms. Peck has counseled juvenile drug court youth and their families, as well as youth at risk for suicide. She'll be transferring to the counseling center at Catholic Charities Hawaii as a therapist in late February or early March 2017. And when not on call for her current position, she enjoys the beach with her family, attending functions at her church, and spending time with her dog, Chico. So if we give them a lot of people online today, we have access to the slides. The slides are up at Help Your KT under Resources and What's New. So information about the presenters as well as the slides themselves are there. So if you guys want to pull them up, that's great. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear us? Okay, thanks for having us. So thank you for the introduction as well. So Lisa and I are going to basically go over our IHBS program. Let me make sure I can coordinate at the same time. So currently we have a team with myself and Lisa. Lisa's the program director, and we have 3 therapists currently. The original team had 5 therapists, but what Mimari had talked about earlier is that we couldn't really sustain such a large team because the amount of referrals that we had due to the criteria was so, I would say, narrow that we were not able to sustain that many therapists. So currently we're at 3. Eventually we'll be increasing to 5, hopefully, as we continue to get more families, which I think is happening. And a lot of that is learning about the criteria, the eligibility of the model, as well as educating the team actually that we work with at Child Welfare on what the criteria is, so they can identify the families that would work with this model. So that's also the component that Mimari was talking about, that there has to be a relationship between the referent and the provider, because it's all about learning about who can meet this criteria and getting those families into our services. So when that happens and the flow happens more, then we can expand and have more service providers. So these are our program goals, basically. Like Mimari says, we are here to address short stayers, so children who have been in the system for 30 days or less. We want to prevent these children from being in the system because it's quite traumatizing, as you can imagine, as a child to be removed from your home and placed in a foster home and not see your family. So that is what we aim to prevent. We want to work with strengthening the families while addressing the safety issue that's been identified by Child Welfare. So that's what we do. We come in, the child is not removed, we work with the safety issue, but we also work with other issues that have come up for the family. A lot of times there's this safety issue that we're looking at, but there are a lot of things that are happening as well. So we look at the whole family and not just the safety issue that come in. And that's where we look to strengthening the family. The home builders philosophy is it is best for children to be raised in their own family whenever possible. So I want you guys to keep that in mind in terms of how we do our work. We want the children to remain in the home, and we basically sandwich and enclose the family with a lot of services provided by our therapists to do exactly that. So the application of the home builders model, there are 3 ways that the home builders model can be applied in Hawaii, well, on the Big Island, on Oahu. That's where the demonstration is happening. It's in Hilo, in Kona, and on Oahu. We work with just placement prevention, but home builders can also do reunification of children that will be reunified with their families, and they also do adoption and long-term foster care stabilization. And I just wanted to list here some of the home builders' values. So again, safety is the highest priority. We really work at reducing barriers, and that's why the therapist does so much. They do the therapy, they do concrete services. We'll go through that eventually. There's a slide. But they really do try and reduce the barriers. And we see family members as our partners, they're there, they're the experts in their family, and we want to learn about what's going on. So a lot of the times, that first week that we're working with them, we're trying to find out what's going on, and we listen a lot, and that's the key. That's how we also establish rapport. So we really see the family member as our colleagues. Even the way that we do our lingo, we don't call, when we're talking about the family, we don't say mom, we don't say dad, we say Mrs. IU or Mr. IU. We really maintain that respect for the family and who they are as people. We provide information and teaching to empower families, and again, we're going to go through that in terms of some of the skills that we teach them. And it's our job to motivate clients and instill hope. So again, there are techniques that we use to help with that. And also that their families are doing the best that they can. So that's kind of where we go and establish, what's going on, what can we help you with. It's like, again, it's not only about the safety issue, which is very important because it is our #1 priority, but also what are some other things that are happening in the home. Okay, so these are home builders program standards. And again, this is really important because we cannot work with a family unless these standards are occurring. So the children are at imminent risk of out-of-home placement, meaning that if home builders does not enter the home or IHBS does not go into the home to help the family, then the child will be immediately placed. That means our referrals are accepted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that means Lisa, as a supervisor, is on call, and when we get a referral, our goal is actually to meet with them immediately. I think we try and meet with them within the first few hours, but definitely within 24 hours. So our response time is very quick. Do you want to say anything about that?
So I think, I think that's where, I think child welfare really wants to use the services, but a primary referral criteria is that if they don't work with us, what's going to happen to the children? That's always the first question I ask. And if they say, well, we're going to keep them in the home or whatever, then I'm like, well, then, placement isn't imminent. So I think that's been, kind of one of the narrower criteria that will keep, the model pure to what it's designed for. Mm-hmm. And so, and then if they say, well, foster care or a group home or whatever, then I know that they're really saying that if we don't come in, that they're going to remove at least one of the children. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so other program standards, again, that you have to have a home builders model, so are that the therapist and the supervisor are available 24/7 to the family. So the family has access to us all the time, and they do call because they are in crisis, or sometimes they just need help with something. We've had situations where a parent might have hit their child, and they immediately call and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened, I don't want to get in trouble with my worker, can you help me out with this, to a lot of different situations. So they definitely do call. We look to service the family in their natural environment. So that is also another criteria. So if a parent is arrested, for example, and they're not going to be returning to the home because there's a TRO and the child is in the home, then that wouldn't qualify, because again, the child is safe. And then the natural environment where the parent is, unavailable, right? So in that situation, again, that would not fit the criteria. The therapist, because of the intensity, they are expected to see their clients 8 to 10 hours a week. And it's a 30-day intervention, 4 to 6 weeks. So they only will have 2 cases at one time. And I know sometimes people say, oh my gosh, I can't believe these therapists only have 2 cases, and sometimes they only have 1, because of the low referrals. But they do work quite a bit, and the expectation from home builders is that you don't just go and see them at 4 o'clock, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You're seeing them at different intervals, because what you want to do is you want to see what their environment is like. So sometimes you go in the morning and you look at what their morning routine is like. Sometimes you go to their dinner routine or homework time. And then the expectation is also that you do see them on a weekend to see what their situation is like over the weekend. So we try and get as full of a picture of the family as possible. We also only have 1 therapist working on the team with the family. That way, we really work with the building rapport first, so we don't switch out therapists at all. Only in situations where it's planned, I would think we would do that.
We have to cover.
If we have to cover, someone's sick. Do you want to say anything about this?
So the beauty too is, even though there's 1 therapist per family, we try and work collaboratively even within our team, because especially when you have 2 cases or a family where they're in high crisis and you're like seeing them every day for like 6 hours a day or something. I mean, we've had cases like that. We can also, all kind of help out with contacting collaterals, or, doing things that are kind of more legwork things, so that we can kind of help support each other. So it's kind of neat in our weekly team consults that we're all kind of aware of our cases and can support each other that way.
Other hallmarks of having a home builders model, is that we have supervision and consultation weekly. So we actually have a home builders consultant at Washington. Her name is Shelly Levitt, and we meet with her once a week by Skype, and we have about an hour to 2 hour team consultation. It's kind of like group supervision, where we go through all of the cases. That way, the fidelity of the model is protected, and she can also help us come up with some other alternatives to what we're working with in terms of using the model, because we're not doing like art therapy or anything that can be subjective. We're really only using the tools that home builders gives us. So sometimes, some of the concerns is that it's very narrow in terms of its therapeutic approach, but we'll talk about that a little later. And then Lisa does weekly supervision as well, so individual supervision as well. And then usually more. Open door, they'll come and see her, but definitely at least weekly. And again, the supervisor is available to the therapist 24/7. And then they also have something else, they call it Quest, but it's like ongoing quality enhancement. So all of our therapists and our supervisors, including myself, are trained in all of the training standards. So they go through a core training, which is I think 3 days, right? 3 days?
4 days.
4-day training where they learn about home builders, and then there's subsequent training. So we have motivational interviewing, cognitive and behavioral teaching. So it goes on where we continue to learn during their time as a service provider, all of these additional trainings. I think we have motivational interviewing coming up in February, relapse prevention. We also have domestic violence. So it's quite a lot of training, and it really helps to keep the therapist fresh in terms of what they're learning, as well as the consultation. Okay. So here are some other components of a home builder's model. Just kind of a refresher. Any questions about the home builder's model so far? Well, I'll take questions at the end actually. Okay. You want to go through criteria?
So basically, the eligibility criteria is that if IHBS services are not available, that the children will be placed, whether it be in protective custody, the worker will petition the court, or voluntary placement agreement will be initiated. So basically, the workers, and a lot of times they might be thinking, oh, I'm going to place, and then they're like, well, let me see if maybe IHBS is going to be able to, address the safety factors enough that the children can remain in the home and we can kind of work with them. So, so it's really, when they're making the referral, they always call the supervisor, and it's really kind of, a back and forth kind of, we spend like 30 minutes, sometimes up to an hour going back and forth about, what's going on with the family, and really making sure it's an appropriate referral on both ends. In addition, another question is, can less intensive services be used first? So that's another thing that our consultant will always ask. Well, can a less intensive service be tried first, and then if they're saying placement is imminent, then they can refer then. So actually the timing is also kind of important of when they make the referral. Maintaining the child in the home is not a temporary plan. So again, we're there to help the family, to keep the family together. The caregiver has been informed of the risk of placement, so they know that if they don't work with us, their children will be removed. So the identified youth or all of the children will be removed. And I think that's been where the collaboration has been really important, because they're basically saying, if you want your children in the home, you need to work with IHBS. And we're saying, well, it's voluntary. However, we want your children to be in the home, and we're here to support you with that. So it really actually works really well together. The caregivers need to be available for an intake session within 24 hours, and that's another thing the worker makes sure that, we're going to be calling them and, seeing them within 24 hours. And basically they describe the intensity of the program, and that they're going to make, even though we're going to try and go when it's convenient for them, they understand that they also have to meet with us around 10 hours a week, which is actually quite a bit when you think about it, because that's only face-to-face time. So, So in terms of the referral process, basically the CRT, or the crisis response team worker, identifies a family who meets the criteria, where they're at the children or a child is at imminent risk for out-of-home placement. Then they call their CRT supervisor and consults with them. If they feel it's appropriate, then either the supervisor or the worker will call me and discuss the eligibility. Then if it meets the criteria, the case is accepted, and I will call my worker and give them the referral. And what we've been doing is having the CRT worker and the therapist talk, so that they've just gone to see the family and explained everything, and that's worked out really well if they have questions or special concerns and things like that. The family is accepted if the criteria is met and IHBS opening is available. And then basically we go and see the family within 24 hours.
So that's the process in terms of referral. We do like it when the CRT worker goes out with the IHBS worker together for that first visit, so all the expectations can be laid out. We found some success in that. Also, sometimes when there's resistance with the family, we will have follow-up meetings with the CRT worker, with the family, just to kind of remind them, because it is a huge time commitment if you think about all the hours that a family needs to spend. However, if you take a look at what would happen if they didn't spend all that time, their children will be removed. So that is where we have found a lot of families that have been very willing to meet with us. And these are families with 2 jobs, they work full time. And so, it's been very neat to see actually, the huge commitment that parents have to their families to keep them intact. Do you want to do therapeutic approaches?
There's that one first.
Oh, one page. Oh, okay. So this slide just shows you the differences between the role of the IHBS therapist and the CWS worker. We've talked about the therapist's role, how they meet with the family, addressing the ongoing needs. The child welfare worker will actually start the safety plan in the home. They will establish the safety issue, and we will review it with them. And if we find that there are additional safety issues, then we will safety plan that and communicate that to the child welfare worker. They do all the referrals. So if, it's determined that a parent needs maybe substance abuse assessment or any type of follow-up, then the child welfare worker will go ahead and do that. Any type of follow-up allegations that would occur with the child welfare worker. And they also meet with the family once a week on their own. And that can be a challenge for a CRT worker who's constantly working with crisis, police, booking, hospital. So that's been a bit of a challenge, and we try and remind the CRT worker of the importance of doing that, because we really need to keep the momentum going, because our intervention is only 4 weeks long, and we need to have that immediacy happening. And sometimes a CRT worker can communicate that better than we can, because they are a little bit, they are the hammer basically that can say, hey, you need to get this done. So those are the differences. We complete the assessments. We send a lot of our documentation to child welfare throughout the intervention, and we also contact them a lot. So the CRT workers are really nice. They give us their cell number because we need to contact them quite a bit. So we actually update them probably 2 to 3 times a week, I would say. It's probably even more than that.
Cases.
Yeah, for some cases. Do you want to go through any of these? Okay, you do assessment. Yeah.
So basically, again, the in-home safety plan that the child welfare or the CRT worker does is really important, because it's basically telling the family what they need to do to keep the children in the home. And then if there is other concerns that come up, we can do our own safety plan in addition and work with the CRT worker with that. We do a pre and a post family assessment. It's called the North Carolina Family Assessment Scale, or the pre-NECFAS and the post-NECFAS. And there's 5 main categories with a rating of -3, 2 plus 2. And within each of those domains, there's all of these subcategories. So it's a pretty comprehensive assessment that we do with the family. And a lot of that is done through active listening, so we don't go there with a form. We kind of just gather information in that first week. In terms of goal setting and service planning, basically in that first week is mostly engagement, getting to know the family, seeing what the needs are, and then talking about things they want to work on, possible goals, and then within a week we do a service plan, and within 2 weeks it's all set and signed with the family. Goals are basically measured with the following: situation a lot better than at intake, all the way down to situation a lot worse than at intake. And we also have a way to have the family rate themselves at the end. So we have something called a progress maintenance plan, which we do with the families, because we don't want them just to do something for 4 weeks and then go back to their old ways, right? We hope that the change is more sustainable and that they're going to continue to use it. So that's always what we keep in mind: how to increase support, whether it's formal or informal, and also involving the family of, okay, so what's really working, not just what can you do, but is this something you'd really use? Like if it's not, let's not do it, you know, and really trying to be real and practical and doing things that are a good fit with the family. And that's part of that active listening and really spending a lot of time with them. Some of the common goals that we've had is definitely, you know, improving parenting. A lot of it is teaching non-physical discipline, a lot of emotion management, whether it's anger or stress or anxiety or whatever it is, interpersonal and life skills, relapse prevention skills, and then also, you know, maintaining home cleanliness and different things like that. But I mean, each family is different and each case is different, which is kind of neat as well, you know, to kind of meet the family where they're at. So in terms of engagement and moving towards change, again, the first week is a lot of active listening, and that's something that is key to the home builders model. So it's really neat because in the first training, in our core training, they do this game where they give us this thing if we ask questions or if we start problem solving, because the first week they really just want us to kind of get to know the family and stuff and kind of let them direct, you know, where they want to go. And we use a lot of motivational interviewing throughout the intervention and, you know, just with the wheel of change going back and forth, you know, and we found that to be really effective with a lot of the families that we work with. So a lot of the, so there's a lot of CBT focus with home builders. They really stress being behaviorally specific and not using our own inferences. So, you know, really backing up our observations and things that we, you know, if something is happening, like how to measure it. So a lot of the things we use is emotions thermometer, REBT, calming self-talk, the cognitive triangle, different things like that. In terms of teaching and skill development, so there is a lot of role playing and coaching, you know, behavior charts, direct teaching, worksheets, assigning homework, and just really kind of being creative to what, again, will be a good fit for the family. So, you know, not all families like to use like worksheets and stuff, so, you know, we'll be creative and like playing, you know, different games with their kids if they're little, or, you know, things that they can use to continue after we close the intervention. So the home builders model also has support with concrete services. So we can transport clients, children and adults, if they sign consent to transport their children, which makes it really a flexible and really all-encompassing way to engage the family. You know, a lot of them might not have a vehicle or might not have money for gas, so we can, you know, take them to the appointments they need to go to, or to help them to get community supports. We can also help with, you know, rent, utilities, food, household goods, medical coverage. So a lot of that first week is trying to see what the immediate needs are and, you know, helping them with those. And then working with the different agencies they may already be involved with, or agencies that might be helpful to them to sustain, you know, after we close. So we really try and work collaboratively with the school, with, you know, if they're in the military, with family advocacy, and just all the different, if they have a therapist already, maybe they can engage in therapy if they're open, and different things like that. And then again, it's really important throughout the 4 weeks that we're really helping them to help themselves. You know, so even though we can even help financially with needs that the family may have, we really look to empower them to advocate for themselves as much as we can.
So in terms of the concrete services, we get to spend a lot of time with our families when we are driving them around. So that is another way that, you know, we're continuing to engage with them, build rapport, discuss exactly what's happening in their family, and, you know, finding out what they really need. We've taken clients to get food, you know, we've taken them to go even grab a meal when they've been hungry. To navigate, you know, like having a child with an IEP where the family doesn't even know what's happening with that, you know, so we'll go with them, we'll take a look at the IEP and you know, ask the school to have another meeting so the parent can be a part of it and to hear what's happening with their child. Those are really important services that the family really appreciates, and it really helps to get the buy-in from them. We're also at the same time trying to expand their network of support, you know. Sometimes we've had families or, you know, parents who maybe they don't get along with that school counselor, you know, so we're kind of help with that, you know, massage that a little bit, so that person can be a support to the family versus an adversary. So we really try and expand, taking a look at what could be a possibility of more support after our services are completed, because again, it's just 4 weeks to 6 weeks. That's not a lot of time. So what we're always thinking of is how can we expand this family support network, you know, and sometimes that even includes family members, you know, what family they have that can offer support to them. You want to do this one, the transition?
So prior to the conclusion of services, really we're assessing how the family thinks they're doing in each of the goals, and also, you know, what we're seeing as well. So the beauty of it is because we spend so much time with them, we have lots of observations, and really it's hard for them to really kind of, I mean, they can still like tell you something, but you'll probably see it, you know, because you're going at different times. They're like, oh yeah, we do this on the weekend, and we go and like, it's totally different, right? But so, you know, but it's good because it's not like we're there to catch them doing bad. We're there to see where the areas of need are so we can support them and really help them to function hopefully in a more healthy or positive manner. And so when they really see us as that support, I feel like they're, you know, honest and open, and they're like, oh, okay, so, you know, what can I do? You know, and what's cool is the CRT worker will also say, you know, we're not removing your kids because you're with IHBS. Just be honest and work on the things you need to, so this won't happen again, you know, and so it's a really cool collaboration in that way. And the good news is that even after we close, we have something called booster sessions. So basically it's about up to 10 hours for up to 5 months after we close. And so they can call us at any time. We can go and have a session with them if they need support at court or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, we've done a lot of different booster sessions with them. So they don't feel like, okay, you're done. You know, like they know that they can still access our support if needed. And that's been really helpful to a lot of families who, you know, might just want to call and say, hey, this happened, I actually did it. And, you know, it's been really neat to see. We try and finish the case within the 4 weeks. If needed, we can have extensions up to 2 weeks, so a 4 to 6 week intervention. But again, we really try to keep within the 4 weeks.
For booster sessions, you would be surprised how many families actually take us up on that, you know, where they keep our contact information and they will call us and say, hey, I've got that court date coming up again. Can you accompany me to court, you know, again? So that's been a really big part of our booster sessions, you know, because we've had clients that English is not their first language. And, you know, we've had a situation where court did not offer them an interpreter within enough time. And our therapist was there to help advocate for that, you know. So a lot of times that navigation through systems can be really a challenge for parents, for their families. And there's a lot of fear is what we've learned. And the families will feel comfortable letting us know, you know, they kind of let their guard down, like Lisa was saying, you know, the CRT worker will say, hey, you know, things are okay, you're working with IHBS, just let them know what's going on. and they will get really comfortable with sharing with us, what's really going on in their families. And that's been, that tells me that, for this particular family, the fact that they're calling us for a booster, we had a real impact, So, and it could be just different, like helping get their child signed up for a Boys and Girls Club or something like that, So it can be a lot of different things. Yeah, so we do try and finish the case within 30 days. However, sometimes additional challenges or challenges continue to happen, and we do consult with our home builders consultant to kind of, get the green light on a case extension. And case extensions don't happen like, oh yeah, let's continue for 2 weeks. It's kind of like, let's continue for 2 days and see how the family's doing. So case extensions are almost day by day, actually. So for the program evaluation and outcome measures part, like Lisa's saying, we do a pre and a post NetFest. We do have, behavioral changes that we measure. We do the placement prevention. We like to see what the numbers are in terms of, how many families have had placement preventions. Also, how many families during the intervention have had unsuccessful where their children were removed. I've got some numbers a little later on. We also like to take a look at if there have been re-referrals. If there's been a re-referral but a successful family and then they've had to be re-referred for some reason. And we also do quite a bit of consumer satisfaction surveys where the referred is given a satisfaction survey at the end of the intervention as well as the family. And we pretty much have like almost 100% return rate on that. I mean, we really make sure people turn that in so we can see, what our outcomes are in terms of how we can improve. There's also the data analysis that is run by the home builders consultant. So in terms of some overall for home builders in general, the implementation of the model is not easy. We started in 2014 and just learning about the types of training that our staff need. Lisa actually as a supervisor is really crucial to the success of bringing up a home builders program because there's a lot of shadowing, believe it or not, that needs to happen for the fidelity of the model. So when we're training a new therapist, they actually shadow the supervisor throughout a whole intervention, meaning they don't take a case until they see their supervisor take a case. The supervisor takes a case, and then after that, that new therapist will take a case, and then the supervisor shadows them for the whole intervention. And that is when that therapist can then take a case on their own. So it's quite a lot of shadowing, a lot of training. So that has been a little bit of a challenge. So it takes a lot of time. The partnership with child welfare has been really critical because if we have not had this communication at the front end and throughout our program, we would be really stuck because without child welfare communicating to their employees and their staff, this is the criteria, there would be even more frustration. And believe it or not, there still is frustration because, there's always this wonder about, well, why can't this case go to IHBS? But I think with the communication and the collaboration, it has become almost the norm that they know, okay, well, this is probably not eligible, but they might try anyway, just in case, just in case, So there's a lot of training. The staff selection is really critical because, as you can imagine, being on call 24/7, it takes a specific type of person with a specific type of lifestyle to be willing to do that. So that is also really crucial to have a successful program. I talked about the supervisor being the key. So we are, losing Lisa. She's moving to a new program. So we are quite bereft about that. So we are looking for a new supervisor right now. And with home builders involved, we actually do 2 interviews. We do when we do staff selection, we do Catholic Charities does their own interview, and then we do a second interview with our home builders consultant in Washington. So where there's role plays, it's quite extensive actually. So it's not easy. It's not easy because home builders has been around since 1974, and they know that it is really critical to find the right fit. So they like to have input into our hiring. So, you know, focus on maintenance of change is critical. No program can be successful without the community support. So again, that's that relationship that we have, as well as relationships with schools, with other service providers. I think it's very common now that people know who IHBS is, and that's a good thing. But a lot of times we still are, you know, educating counselors about what we do when we go into doctor's appointments. So, you know, sometimes the doctor's like, who is this therapist that you're bringing to your appointment? Why are you bringing this person in with you? You know, so a lot of times the therapist is doing a lot of education to people about what their role is, because it is definitely different. And again, home builders continues to do research. So here are some of our numbers right now for our program. It should say actually for Oahu, I just realized that. So total number of referrals from the start of our program. We have 53 cases that were accepted. The total number of cases where placement was prevented is 48. And we had 5 cases where placement happened during the intervention. And for the 5, I know that at least 2 were babies. 2 of them were babies with mental health issues where there's a lot of resistance from the parents, and it was like a single parent, I think. So there was not a lot of safety that could be provided. You know, when you have a person that does not want to work with you, that has an infant, and when we say infant, we mean like the baby was just born, you know. Can you recall any of the other, were they mostly there?
Well, sometimes with drug use or domestic violence, you know, if they go back to the partner or like, you know, relapse, you know, they go back into it and they basically pick that over their children or whatever. I mean, there's different reasons, but there's also a bunch of cases we've had that's ineligible. So if basically, even though I've accepted it, within 3 days, for whatever reason, we find out either the safety is too high or whatever, then we can also close as ineligible. So we don't count that in our numbers.
Mm-hmm. So as you can see, the program was established in 2014, and even though we've had quite a lot of successes in terms of our numbers, the numbers are quite small, which is why we try and keep the staff smaller so we can make sure they can practice their skills. Because the therapists at the same time, they're learning new skills. They're picking up, you know, like this is what this is the intervention they're gonna use if it's cognitive or RBT. And if you can't practice that, then you're gonna lose it, you know? So that's the reason why we also want to try and keep our staff on the small side until we can pick up a little bit more. So these next slides are just some history of home builders. They're in Washington State, and Federal Way is their main hub. And it did come to Hawaii at one point.
I was working there.
Yeah, I don't remember what year that was. Do you remember?
Was right around 94.
Was it 94?
95.
Yeah, I think, who was the provider?
PAC
was the provider. I think it was through DOH, I want to say. Is it through Camdy?
We did get
No,
referrals through
we had
CRH,
it,
but
yeah.
Oh, was it through
Yeah,
Child Welfare?
Yeah, Child Welfare had it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it has been in Hawaii before, but I think, if I recall, I think there was just concerns about, well, the caseloads are so small, and, you know, again, maybe just some of the smaller numbers. So then these are just some of the other states that have had it. And then if you take a look, they're also international. So our consultant, we kind of envy her sometimes because she'd be like, well, I'm just flying to Australia tomorrow. And we're like, oh, lucky you. Can we have a training in Australia? But yeah, I mean, they just go all over the place. Canada is another large part of where they have their services. And they work with a lot of indigenous families. I think in Canada they do. I think in Washington they do. In Australia as well. So, yeah, that's all I know about the international part. And that, I think, is the last slide that we have. So this is our contact information for Lisa and myself. We also have the website, the Institute for Family Development. That is the home of home builders. So you can take a look there because they have a lot of their fidelity measures, basically how they do a lot of their practice right there. And then I have our consultant's email, Shelly. I didn't even ask for, but she would be glad to talk to you. She is very passionate about home builders, and we are actually very fortunate to have her as our consultant because she is quite the expert on home builders. And the neat thing is when we have, when Shelly's not available, we have access to different consultants, and they just have like a different spin on things, so you get to learn a lot from a consultant that's covering. So it's a very rich, I would say, environment where we're always learning about how to use the home builders model and how to be creative with it, with children and with parents. So it is always a learning experience. So I guess we can open it up to questions now.
Well, I did have 2 questions that I've crossed off because you answered them
Oh,
after
good.
I came up with them, so that was good.
Perfect.
So you know that was one of my first jobs, right?
Oh,
Brand
I
new
know
on a
that.
master's degree program in the mid-90s. And I was green as green can be, so it was very... So my question for you folks is, and because it was so stressful, what type of self-care does the Home Builders program recommend for your therapist and you folks that deal with this type of stress day in and day out now?
Well, we try and offer the staff a lot of flexibility with their work schedule. We allow them to come in, late, work from home, remotely. So a lot of that is just communicated with the supervisor. And, we also expect accountability, of course, so we have them put their schedules down in Outlook and we have them update it constantly. I know that can be tedious, but then, on the opposite end, if the therapist wants to say not work like a half a day on one day, then they need to have the reasoning behind it. So that's kind of it's just checks and balances. So that is kind of where we have that flexibility when they have 2 cases. Now, if they only have 1 case, it's a little bit different, But again, if they're working a lot of hours, we try and balance it. It's not like quid pro quo where it's okay, 1 for 1. But we really try and keep that in mind, And Lisa as well, because, Lisa does a lot. We'll talk about self-care and vacation time, if they're not feeling it one day, then we allow that,
And I think that's something that our consultant has said, when we're busy, we have cases or whatever, and we're working a lot of hours, but when we don't, that's when we can flex, and take the time, or be creative in how we use it, if someone has something on a Thursday morning or whatever, we'll just work around it. And I think it's also that team collaboration, because I always tell them, just because you're the therapist for the case doesn't mean you can't get support from the rest of us, especially if we're not busy, we're waiting for a case. And I think that's where the good fit comes in, because I think those that are a good fit will put in the time with the clients and will also be a team player. So then that, to me, helps prevent the burnout, because, it's a real team effort. And also, I know that when they're with their client, they're giving their all, and then so when they don't have a case, they can, take more breaks and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because sometimes we do have therapists that, are not working, they're kind of waiting for a case, but then we have another therapist that's really like burning it on both ends and just doing some really intense stuff. So during our team consultation, during our staff meeting, it's an opportunity for that team to come together and help support that person, you know, helping with resources, helping gather things. You know, we had, I think, one case where we had a new employee start, and she was like an expert with like child development and, you know, all of the resources. So she helped another therapist with that, you know, because it's just one less thing or three less things that that person has to do, because they do everything, you know. I mean, you're driving them around, you're going to doctor's appointments. We go to the doctor's appointments, I know that sounds a little odd, but sometimes we have children with wounds that have not been, they have not gone to the doctor, you know, so we have to literally take the family to the doctor so they understand the importance of wound care and follow-up and da-da-da. So, so all of these things take a lot of time, as you can imagine, you know, so even finding a form, getting them connected with WIC, you know, a colleague can help do that when you're busy, like, you know, sitting down with a family, you know, and doing that one-to-one or that family time. So we really try and establish a cohesive team, and I think Lisa has done it with this round of staff. I think that that fit is really important, because if you come in, if you have an employee come in and just say, well, I didn't know I was like on call really 24/7, then we're like, well, it's time for you to really think about if this is the right place for you, because it really is 24/7. It's not like, oh, maybe 24/7, it's like really 24/7. So that's the other thing that we have learned in terms of our lessons with hiring, that we have to get people that are willing, like Lisa said, to do the time, to go at different times. I mean, you're not just going when it's convenient for you because you're going to pick up your children at like 5 o'clock. You're going to go, like, if the kids come home at 5 o'clock for the family, then that's when you're going. So that's also what lessons that we have learned in terms of hiring.
Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
Hi, you guys had mentioned that one of the ways you can apply the Home Builders program is with the reunification process. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and how that referral process happens if you're doing that?
Well,
Sure, sorry, just real quick. One of the PTC folks asked if you could repeat the question before you answer it. That might feed directly to
Oh, this one doesn't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the question was about the reunification process and if we're currently using that with home builders and how that works. We're actually not, no, but I think we're hoping to.
Down the road, yeah.
Talk about
So
that.
that will be a question for CWS, and the current model focus solely on prevention because of the fact that our target population is short stayers, and presumably, based on our data, when we designed this as Hawaii's model, CRT and IHBS really went hand in hand to prevent further displacement instead of returning children sooner. So currently, we're not doing the reunification model. We tested with few, meaning we informally, without getting the federal government involved, just a couple of ways to test it, how it works. We allowed our regular assessment workers who are investigating a report of abuse or neglect, and those that are considered placement imminent. So that meets the criteria of that prevention model. And sometimes these children were already removed, but within the 7-day period, which is part of the prevention model. So that's what we apply the prevention model to. But it's not open to all investigation cases as of yet. And plus the home builders model criteria is that placement imminent for prevention. And we actually asked that exact question when I was on the call with East Hawaii. So for reunification, those children who are already in foster care and assuming or getting close to going back home within the next 7 days, that's when IHBS can be implemented, or at least being in place, so that when children is getting ready to go home, IHBS can be just hit the ground and run with the parents. So that's part of that eligibility criteria of the reunification side, except that the model itself is the same. That's my understanding. It's just that adding that one layer of, or deviating from placement in it, because children are already in placement. So that's the difference. And in the future, we are hoping to move towards that. Under the current labor project, we're not doing that.
Oh. I don't know if you addressed this already, so I apologize if it's redundant. But where does the very brief model come from? So, you know, it's a month plus maybe a little bit more. Is that a result of testing longer models, or is it primarily concern about dependency or cost? What's the rationale? That, I mean, I know it's from Home Builders model, but
So the
where
question
did they
is,
get it?
why is it, where does the duration or the time limit come from? I'm sure they've done a lot of research. Yeah, they've done a lot of research to back up the briefness of their model. I think it has something to do with the family is in crisis right now, and this is the time when they are most willing to make the change. So again, it's short, and then we want to link them. So we don't link them like at the last week.
Right.
We're like linking them in the beginning, you know. So we try and do an Ohana conference where, you know, they can bring their family together, or service providers. So we try and do that at the front end as well throughout the intervention. So, but I don't know specifically what the research is, how that is backed up. Yeah.
And then, you know, we're talking to one of the consultants about, you know, extending, like how often do you extend? Because you think 4 weeks isn't a whole lot. But she said actually, as they've done this model for many years, that they've actually found trying to do it in the 4 weeks, in the 28 days, is actually more effective than just trying to draw it out, like for some reason. So, I mean, of course there are cases it needs to be extended, but again, that's not the goal. Yeah.
I'm curious partly because, you know, MST is one of the evidence-based services that CAMP provides, and it's 5 months. And if there's anything that people whine about, it's the briefness. They don't want to use it because it's only 5 months. They can't kind of relax and let the kid. I don't know. But the briefness is a big complaint. So I'm thinking, wow, 1 month, that's really brief.
And I believe that's in part, that's everyone's sense of urgency, that without this intensity, children will be removed. So those parents who have that sense of urgency is more willing than driving it out and participate in long-term services.
Yeah, now the state has your life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You want your kids
And
to
we
do this
want
thing.
the families to move on with their lives and not CWS or anybody to be in their lives all the time, right? And children grow up as children with their parents and family. So that's the basic value that we see, and we hope to continue to practice. So that briefness for us, based on what we saw in the data and wanted to actually demonstrate and learn from it, was that, you know, short stayers. And to address that crisis at the time, and truly just going to homes and work with families in their own home or grocery store when these crises actually happen. So that's a huge difference, that our therapist, IHBS therapist, is available 24/7 and teach these actual skills in the time of crisis. And that's really beneficial to truly prevent from happening again.
So again, reasons we extend is because we want to see the family practicing the skills, so it's not theory. It's actually, and we tell them, you know, we really like to write that in our closing report, that we observed you doing this and this is whatever, you know, and so that's one of the main reasons we extend, is to give the family time to actually practice it and we can see them doing it.
So have you guys done any follow-up research to see how many families, 6 months, 9 months, wherever it is down the road, are still intact?
So the question is, if we had rather longitudinal or long-term evaluation, outcome evaluation of those families who successfully completed the intensive home-based services. So the question, the answer is yes, we are doing it currently, and that's part of the evaluation plan. And as of right now, and it's not necessarily long-term yet, we have been doing this program as of February 1st of 2015. So, yeah. So it's about 2 years. But the first half, again, the process of training took a little bit of time. So that our numbers are a little smaller than what we ambitiously anticipated or projected. But so far on Oahu, what I have is of the 71 children who received IHBS services on Oahu, 14 children were referred back to child welfare after IHBS closed. So that's about 14%. That's our evaluators analyze. But that's first 18 months. So from beginning of the implementation through June 30th of 2016 data. And it's not necessarily looking at after 6 months how many children or how many families came back in. So it's just looking at the entirety and how many at the point of data pull return to child welfare or refer to child welfare. So the evaluation plan is to look at that, 6 months, 12 months. And Home Builders model, on the website, internal evaluation of the home builders says about 73% to 91% success rate at the 12 months of since the date of initiation of the service. So that's our 14%, even regardless of the time frame so far for Oahu, seems to be within that range.
You listed one last question.
Let me see if anyone.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like we ought to ask them first.
Okay.
Folks on this.
Yeah, so folks online, Maddie, Pua, Kelsey, any Lisa questions?
Can they hear you? Do you guys have any questions?
Kelsey has a question. She just texted me. She's like, I have a question. So she hung up the phone. She's like, I have a question I want to ask. She texted me and then she hung up.
There's a question back there.
So my question is, of the 71 kids, how many of them have a diagnosed disability?
Diagnosed disability. Of the 71 kids, how many of them have a diagnosed disability? Oh, we're not keeping that number, huh?
I might, but I mean, CWS site might have some information, but I don't have that number currently. But anecdotally,
That's a good.
I mean, I don't, yeah.
Look at the IEP numbers you end up going to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Let's just do it out, put it in their window.
Every case is different.
That's true, yeah, every case is
But
different.
my point is, I think it's absolutely fabulous that you are providing true wraparound. And that parents of kids with disabilities have been asking for this kind of service for decades, and it's very rare to be able to get it, so kudos to you.
oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And what I believe what we've been seeing, and I'm not involved intimately like the home builders therapist. I'm at the project level, but based on the conversations in case discussion, what we found is that those parents who are offered IHBS also have past trauma in their own lives and have lots of underlying mental health issues, trauma issues, PTSD. So while home builders model truly stabilized crisis, and that's the goal, but that doesn't mean child welfare or post-IHBS services are not offered. When we see that, we do offer our differential response system. Instead of bringing them in to child welfare, we divert them to receive additional services to further address those rather long-term matters to deal with. But that's kind of the first step for us to make sure children are safe in their home, while IHBS therapist is there to teach actual skills.
I just have a very fast question, if you could. Does family strengthening services still exist? It's called family strengthening services? Oh, they're still around. Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that brings us to a close for today.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.